The red and blue lights cut through the humid darkness like angry fireflies, their reflection dancing across the rain-slicked parking lot of the Coastal View Inn. Officer Martinez stepped out of his patrol car, his boots splashing into a puddle that had formed where the pavement had cracked during the storm. Hurricane Elena had torn through the coast just 36 hours ago, leaving behind a trail of destruction that would take months to rebuild. The hotel, one of the few structures still standing with power and running water, had become an impromptu refuge for dozens of displaced families. "This better be good," Martinez muttered under his breath, adjusting his radio as he approached the lobby. The glass doors revealed a scene of organized chaos inside. Families huddled together on mismatched furniture, children sleeping on makeshift beds of hotel linens, and the constant hum of worried conversations in multiple languages. The air conditioning worked overtime against the oppressive heat, but it couldn't quite mask the underlying tension that seemed to permeate every corner of the crowded space. Behind the reception desk, Sarah Chen, the night manager, looked up from her computer screen with exhausted eyes. At 28, she had been running hotels for 6 years, but nothing had prepared her for managing a disaster shelter. Her usually pristine uniform was wrinkled, her hair pulled back in a messy bun, and dark circles under her eyes spoke of sleepless nights spent coordinating with emergency services, insurance companies, and increasingly desperate families. "Officer Martinez." "Thank goodness you're here," Sarah said, her voice carrying the weight of accumulated stress. "I'm not sure what to do about this situation. We have a guest who's been extremely aggressive about another family staying here." Martinez nodded, his eyes scanning the lobby. "Where are the parties involved?" Before Sarah could answer, a sharp voice cut through the ambient noise like a blade. "Finally, I've been waiting for over an hour. Do you have any idea how long it takes to get proper law enforcement response in this town?" The voice belonged to Karen Whitfield, a 53-year-old woman whose platinum blonde hair remained perfectly styled despite the chaos around her. She wore a designer tracksuit that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent, and her manicured nails clicked impatiently against her smartphone case as she approached the officer. Her face was set in an expression of righteous indignation, the kind that suggested she was accustomed to getting her way through sheer force of personality. "Ma'am, I'm Officer Martinez. I understand there's been some kind of disturbance." "Disturbance that's putting it mildly," Karen snapped, her voice rising above the general din. "I have been a loyal customer of this hotel chain for 15 years. 15 years I have platinum status, officer, and I refuse to be subjected to this." She gestured dramatically toward the far corner of the lobby, where a family of 4 sat quietly on a worn leather couch. The Jenkins family, Marcus, 34, his wife Aisha, 31, and their 2 children, 10-year-old Zoe and 7-year-old Malik, looked up nervously as attention turned toward them. Marcus, a tall man with kind eyes and calloused hands that spoke of honest work, instinctively pulled his family closer. Aisha, an elementary school teacher with natural hair pulled back in a colorful head wrap, held her youngest son protectively. The Jenkins family had lost everything. Their small house in the lower 9th Ward had been completely destroyed when a massive oak tree, uprooted by Elena's 100-mile-per-hour winds, crashed through their roof. They had evacuated to the emergency shelter first, but overcrowding and unsanitary conditions had forced them to seek alternative accommodation. Marcus had used his emergency savings to book a room at the Coastal View Inn, one of the few hotels still accepting guests after the storm. "What exactly is the problem, ma'am?" Martinez asked, though he was beginning to suspect he already knew. "The problem," Karen said, her voice dripping with condescension, "is that those people clearly don't belong in a hotel of this caliber. I mean, look at them. Look at their children running around, making noise, disrupting the peace. This is supposed to be a respectable establishment, not some kind of shelter. An uncomfortable silence fell over the nearby guests. Several families, the Rodriguezes, who had driven up from Houston when their apartment flooded, the elderly Morrison couple, whose retirement home had been evacuated, the young professional, David Kim, whose condo building had lost power indefinitely, all turned to watch the unfolding drama. Martinez looked over at the Jenkins family again. The children were indeed moving around, but they were playing quietly with a deck of cards, their voices barely audible above the general noise level. Malik was showing his sister a simple magic trick, making a card disappear and reappear, while Zoe giggled softly. It was, by any reasonable standard, perfectly normal behavior for children who had just lost their home. "Ma'am, I don't see any disruptive behavior," Martinez said carefully. "Are you saying these guests are violating hotel policy in some way?" "Policy?" Karen's voice rose to a near shriek. "Policy, officer. I shouldn't have to explain this to you. These people are obviously here on some kind of charity program. They're probably not even paying full price. It's not fair to legitimate guests like myself who pay premium rates for a quality experience." Sarah Chen stepped forward, her professional composure barely concealing her growing anger. "Ma'am, I've already explained to you multiple times that all our guests have valid reservations and have paid in full. The Jenkins family is staying in room 247, which they booked and paid for in advance." "I don't believe that for a second," Karen shot back. "Show me the receipt. Show me proof that they actually paid full price and aren't here on some kind of voucher program." This was the moment when the situation crystallized for everyone present. The lobby had grown progressively quieter as more people tuned in to the confrontation. Mrs. Rodriguez, a 70-year-old grandmother who had been through the civil rights movement in the 1960s, stood up slowly from her chair, her dark eyes flashing with recognition and anger. Marcus Jenkins had been hoping to avoid this confrontation, but now he had no choice. He stood up, his full height imposing, but his demeanor remained calm and dignified. "Officer, my family and I have every right to be here. We paid for our room in advance, and we have the confirmation email and credit card statement to prove it." He pulled out his smartphone, fingers moving efficiently across the screen despite the slight tremor in his hands. "Here's our reservation confirmation from 3 days ago, before the storm hit. Here's the charge on my credit card, and here's the receipt from when we checked in yesterday evening." "That could be faked," Karen said dismissively. "Anyone can Photoshop a receipt nowadays." "Officer, I'm telling you, these people are here illegally. They're probably squatting, or they're part of some government program that puts undesirable elements in decent hotels." The word undesirable hung in the air like a toxic cloud. Everyone in the lobby now understood exactly what was happening. This wasn't about noise complaints or hotel policies. This was about race, pure and simple. Karen Whitfield, in her designer tracksuit and with her platinum hotel status, had decided that a black family didn't belong in her space. Sarah Chen had reached her breaking point. She had been working in hospitality for nearly a decade, and she had dealt with difficult guests before. But this was different. This was personal. This was about the fundamental dignity of human beings who had lost everything in a natural disaster and were simply trying to find a safe place for their children to sleep. "Ma'am," Sarah said, her voice now carrying a steel edge that made several nearby guests look up. "I'm going to say this one more time, and I want you to listen very carefully. The Jenkins family is a legitimate guest of this hotel. They have paid in full for their accommodation. They have committed no violations of hotel policy. They are welcome here, and they will remain welcome here for the duration of their stay. This is ridiculous. Karen's voice reached a pitch that made nearby children cover their ears. I want to speak to the general manager. I want to speak to the owner. I want these people removed immediately. Or I'm calling corporate headquarters. The general manager is me, Sarah replied flatly. I'm the senior manager on duty. And I'm telling you that your request is not only unreasonable, it's discriminatory. If you continue to harass other guests, I'm going to have to ask you to leave. This was the moment when Karen realized she wasn't dealing with some minimum wage desk clerk who would fold under pressure. Sarah Chen was a professional with years of experience, and she wasn't going to be intimidated by threats or entitled behavior. You can't throw me out, Karen said, but there was a note of uncertainty in her voice now. I'm a paying customer. I have rights. You do have rights, Officer Martinez interjected, having watched the entire exchange with growing disgust. But you don't have the right to harass other guests based on their race. Ma'am, I'm going to need you to return to your room and leave these people alone. Race. Karen's voice hit a new octave. Race. This has nothing to do with race. This is about standards. This is about the quality of clientele that this hotel attracts. But even as she spoke, Karen knew she had lost. The words sounded hollow, even to her own ears. Everyone in the lobby could see through the thin veneer of her objections to the ugly truth underneath. Mrs. Rodriguez, the elderly grandmother, approached the group with slow, deliberate steps. Her weathered hands gripped a simple wooden cane, and her eyes held the weight of decades of experience with exactly this kind of prejudice. Señora, she said, her accented English carrying a quiet authority. I lived through the days when people like you told people like me that we didn't belong in certain places. I have seen this hate before, and I will not stand by and watch it happen again. Her words sparked something in the other guests. David Kim, the young professional, stood up from his laptop where he had been trying to work. Ma'am, I've been watching this whole thing, and frankly, the only person causing a disturbance here is you. The Morrison couple, married for 43 years and survivors of countless storms, both literal and metaphorical, nodded in agreement. That family has been nothing but polite and quiet, Mrs. and Morrison said. Their children are better behaved than most adults I know. Karen found herself surrounded by a wall of disapproval. These weren't angry protesters or activists. These were ordinary people, families, elderly couples, young professionals, who had simply reached the limit of their tolerance for bigotry. You're all being manipulated, Karen said desperately. This is exactly what they want. They want to make you feel guilty so you'll accept lower standards. But I won't be silenced. I won't be shamed into accepting what Marcus Jenkins had finally reached his own breaking point. His voice was calm, but carried the controlled power of a man who had dealt with this kind of hatred before. Accepting that my family deserves the same respect as anyone else. Accepting that my children have the right to exist in the same spaces as yours. He stepped forward, and Karen instinctively stepped back. But Marcus wasn't advancing aggressively. He was simply claiming his space, asserting his dignity in the face of an attempt to diminish it. Lady, my house was destroyed by a hurricane. My children lost everything they owned. We're not here because we want to be here. We're here because we have nowhere else to go. And we paid for this room with money I earned working 60-hour weeks at a construction company, rebuilding places that storms like Elena tore down. His voice grew stronger as he continued. I don't need your permission to exist. I don't need your approval to provide shelter for my family. And I sure as hell don't need to justify my presence to someone who thinks her hotel status gives her the right to determine who belongs in this world. The lobby had become completely silent, except for the hum of the air conditioning and the distant sound of wind still gusting outside. Even the children had stopped playing, sensing the gravity of the moment. Aisha Jenkins stood up beside her husband, her teacher's instincts kicking in. She had dealt with difficult parents before, people who questioned her authority or her qualifications because of how she looked. But this was different. This was about her children's right to simply exist in the world without being made to feel ashamed or unwelcome. "Ma'am," she said, her voice carrying the quiet authority of someone who had spent years managing classrooms full of children. "I teach third grade. I spend my days trying to help children learn to treat each other with respect and kindness. What you're doing right now is exactly the kind of behavior I work every day to prevent." She gestured toward her own children, who were now clinging to their parents' legs, clearly frightened by the confrontation. "These are children. They're scared, they're tired, and they've lost their home. What kind of person looks at children in that situation and decides they don't belong somewhere?" Karen's mouth opened and closed, like a fish gasping for air. She had built her entire argument on the assumption that everyone would either agree with her or be too intimidated to speak up. She had never considered that she might face unified opposition from the very people she was trying to protect from the undesirable presence of the Jenkins family. Officer Martinez had heard enough. He had been a police officer for 12 years, and he had seen his share of domestic disputes, noise complaints, and genuine disturbances. This wasn't any of those things. This was harassment, plain and simple, and it was based on nothing more than racial prejudice. "Ma'am," he said, his voice carrying the weight of official authority, "I'm going to ask you one more time to return to your room and leave these people alone. If you continue to harass other guests, I'm going to have to cite you for disorderly conduct." "Disorderly conduct?" Karen's voice cracked. "I'm the victim here. I'm the one being attacked. I just wanted to stay in a nice hotel without being subjected to what, Mrs.?" Rodriguez asked, her voice soft but cutting. "To the presence of a black family. Say it, Señora. Say what you really mean." The challenge hung in the air like a sword. Karen realized that every word she said now was digging her deeper into a hole she couldn't escape from. But she was too far committed to back down now. "This has nothing to do with race," she insisted, but her voice lacked conviction. "This is about maintaining standards, about preserving the quality of experience that legitimate guests expect." "And what exactly makes them illegitimate?" David Kim asked. "The fact that they're black, because I've been watching them for 2 days. And they've been nothing but polite and respectful. More respectful than you're being right now." Sarah Chen realized that this moment represented something larger than just a hotel dispute. This was about the kind of society they wanted to live in, the kind of values they wanted to uphold, especially in times of crisis, when people's true characters were revealed. "Ms. Whitfield," she said, her voice now carrying the finality of a judge's gavel, "I'm going to make this very simple for you. The Jenkins family is staying. They are welcome here. If you can't accept that, then I'm going to have to ask you to find alternative accommodations." "You can't throw me out," Karen shrieked. "I'm a platinum member. I'll sue this hotel. I'll sue the chain. I'll have your job." "Actually," Sarah said, pulling out a thick folder from behind the desk, "I can—" "According to the terms of service that you agreed to when you checked in, the hotel reserves the right to refuse service to any guest who engages in discriminatory behavior or harassment of other guests." She opened the folder and began reading from an official-looking document. Section 4.3. Guests who engage in behavior that creates a hostile environment for other guests, including but not limited to discriminatory language or actions based on race, ethnicity, religion, or national origin, may be asked to leave the premises immediately without refund. Karen's face went white. She had never actually read the terms of service, assuming that her platinum status would protect her from any consequences. But now she was facing the reality that her behavior had legal consequences. Furthermore, Sarah continued, I'm going to be filing a report with corporate headquarters about this incident. Your behavior tonight has violated not only hotel policy, but also basic human decency. I'm recommending that your platinum status be revoked across all properties in the chain. This was the moment when Karen realized that her actions had consequences beyond this single confrontation. Her platinum status, that she had wielded like a weapon, was about to be stripped away. Her threats to call corporate headquarters suddenly seemed hollow when she realized that corporate would be hearing about her behavior, whether she called or not. You can't do this to me, she whispered, but the fight had gone out of her voice. I'm a loyal customer. I've been coming to these hotels for years. And now you won't be coming anymore. Sarah said simply. Officer Martinez, would you please escort Ms. Whitfield to her room so she can collect her belongings? Martinez nodded. Ma'am, you have 15 minutes to pack your things. Then, I'm going to need you to leave the premises. As Karen was led away, still muttering threats and complaints, the lobby slowly returned to its normal rhythm. But something had changed. The other guests looked at each other with a new sense of solidarity. They had stood up to bigotry together, and they had won. Mrs. Rodriguez approached the Jenkins family with a warm smile. Niños, she said to Zoe and Malik, would you like to learn some card games? I know some tricks that are even better than magic. The children's faces lit up, and soon they were gathered around the elderly woman's chair, giggling as she showed them sleight-of-hand tricks that her own grandfather had taught her decades ago. David Kim closed his laptop and joined the group. Hey, I've got a Nintendo Switch in my room if the kids want to play some games later. The Morrison couple approached Marcus and Aisha. We're sorry you had to go through that, Mrs. Morrison said. Nobody should have to deal with that kind of hatred, especially not after losing their home. Thank you, Aisha said, tears in her eyes. We were starting to wonder if we were the problem, if we really didn't belong here. You belong here just as much as anyone else, Mr. Morrison said firmly. More than some people. Apparently. Sarah Chen came over to the family with a genuine smile. I'm sorry you had to experience that. I want you to know that the management of this hotel stands behind you 100%. If you need anything at all, please don't hesitate to ask. Actually, she continued, I'm going to upgrade your room to a suite. It's the least we can do after what you've been through tonight. That's not necessary, Marcus said. But Sarah held up her hand. It's necessary for me, she said. I need to do something to restore my faith in humanity after what just happened. 15 minutes later, Officer Martinez returned to the lobby with Karen in tow. She had packed her belongings and was wheeling her designer suitcase behind her with jerky, angry movements. Her face was red with embarrassment and rage. But she had finally accepted that she had lost this battle. As they walked through the lobby, the other guests watched in silence. There was no celebration, no jeering, just a quiet satisfaction that justice had been done. At the door, Karen turned back for one last look. You'll all regret this, she said, but her voice was weak and defeated. When this place goes downhill, don't come crying to me. Nobody responded. They just watched as she walked out into the humid night, her footsteps echoing across the empty parking lot. After she was gone, Officer Martinez turned to address the room. I want to commend everyone here tonight. You showed courage in standing up to bigotry, and you showed kindness in supporting a family in need. This is what community looks like. Over the next few days, word of the incident spread throughout the community. The story was picked up by local news stations, and the Coastal View Inn received hundreds of calls and messages of support. Sarah Chen was commended by corporate headquarters for her handling of the situation, and the hotel's reputation actually improved as a result of the incident. Karen Whitfield, as promised, had her platinum status revoked across all hotel chains in the network. When she tried to book rooms at other hotels in the area, she found that word of her behavior had spread, and she was quietly refused service at establishment after establishment. But more importantly, the Jenkins family found something they hadn't expected in the aftermath of losing their home: a new community. The other guests at the hotel became friends, exchanging contact information and promising to stay in touch. Mrs. Rodriguez adopted the children as honorary grandchildren, teaching them Spanish phrases and traditional Mexican recipes. David Kim helped Marcus network with contacts in the tech industry, leading to a better job opportunity. The Morrisons shared their own stories of surviving hardship and rebuilding their lives. 3 months later, the Jenkins family had moved into a new home, larger and nicer than the one they had lost. Marcus had taken the job that David had helped him find, and Aisha had been offered a position at a better school district. The children had adjusted well, making new friends and thriving in their new environment. On the anniversary of Hurricane Elena, the Coastal View Inn hosted a reunion for the families who had stayed there during the crisis. They gathered in the same lobby where the confrontation had taken place, but now it was filled with laughter and warm conversation. Sarah Chen had prepared a special dinner, and the hotel had been decorated with photos from the past year, showing how everyone's lives had progressed. As the evening wound down, Marcus stood up to address the group. "A year ago, we lost everything in a storm, but we found something here that we never expected. We found a family. We found people who looked past the color of our skin and saw us as human beings deserving of dignity and respect." He looked around the room at faces that had become dear to him over the past year. "That night, when that woman tried to have us removed, I thought about giving up. I thought about taking my family and leaving, just to avoid the confrontation. But you all stood up for us. You showed us that there are still good people in this world." Aisha stood beside her husband, her arm around his waist. "We learned that night that hatred is loud, but love is stronger. That prejudice may be persistent, but justice will always win in the end when good people stand together." The children, now a year older and more confident, had prepared a special presentation for the group. They had created a photo album documenting their journey from that first night at the hotel to their new life. The final page showed all of them together, smiling and happy, with a simple message: home is where people care about each other. As the reunion came to an end, people hugged goodbye and promised to stay in touch. The Coastal View Inn had become more than just a hotel to them. It had become a symbol of hope, of community, and of the power of ordinary people to stand up for what's right. Sarah Chen stood in the lobby after everyone had left, looking around at the space that had witnessed such a transformation. A year ago, this room had been filled with tension and hatred. Tonight, it had been filled with love and celebration. She thought about Karen Whitfield, who had presumably moved on to spread her poison elsewhere. She wondered if the woman had learned anything from the experience, if she had reflected on the consequences of her actions. Probably not. People like Karen rarely changed. But that was okay, because for every Karen Whitfield in the world, there were dozens of people like Mrs. Rodriguez, David Kim, the Morrisons, and countless others who were willing to stand up for what's right. For every voice raised in hatred, there were more voices raised in love. The Jenkins family had not only survived Hurricane Elena, they had thrived in its aftermath. They had found a new home, new opportunities, and most importantly, A new family. The storm had taken away their house, but it had given them something infinitely more valuable, the knowledge that they were not alone in the world. And in the end, that made all the difference.